Gavin Newsom and Ron DeSantis, governor of California and governor of Florida, might be debating. I am so excited about that, at least partially because I want the great debate to occur, the reckoning over COVID policies. I want people to have to defend their decisions. Partially because I, like a lot of you, have kids that were in school, and you know about the learning loss and how much of a setback that was, and it turns out for no good reason whatsoever. And now the maddening thing that in a lot of places, like in California, they're trying to hide the ball on that whole story.
That's right. Anybody with a conscience and a brain has wanted some sort of accountability for the enormous damage done to kindergartners through college students, and it appears the cover-up has begun. To discuss this, we've invited on Kevin Kiley. He's a first-term congressman serving California's 3rd District, and he is living proof that not everybody in California has lost their minds. He was long part of the California legislature as well. Kevin, welcome. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
So in what way is California trying to keep people from knowing how bad the policies were?
Well, this is just, even for California, hard to believe what they're doing. Of course, as you were just alluding to, California had the worst school shutdown policies in the entire country. We were literally 50th out of the 50 states in getting kids back to school.
Wow.
And therefore harmed our students more than any state in the country. So there's a lawsuit right now that's about the state's failure to prevent this catastrophic learning loss during the whole COVID era. And what the state is doing right now, the Department of Education in particular, is it's trying to stop researchers from testifying against it in this lawsuit. And they have 2 people, researchers from Stanford in particular, who are prepared to testify. In fact, one has already submitted a brief about how catastrophic these policies were. And the Department of Education is saying, no, because you have access to state education data as part of an unrelated contract, we're going to forbid you from testifying in any lawsuit against the state or the Department of Education. Now, I say against because they'd welcome them to testify in a lawsuit on their behalf, but they're specifically barring them from taking any position that is adverse to the department.
If you want a clue as to how egregious this is, the ACLU, which has gone from being a defender of free speech to a far left activist organization, even the ACLU said, whoa, this is too far. We can't approve this. You're violating the professor's First Amendment rights.
That's right, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're saying that anyone who does any sort of research with the state, you can't testify against the Department of Education in any sort of legal proceeding, even if it has nothing to do with the nature of your research. And so the ACLU, you're right. They have not been on the right side of a lot of issues lately, but they are drawing a line here and saying this is clearly a violation of the First Amendment, and it's clearly viewpoint discrimination because it's the state barring a particular view that is one that is adverse to what they're doing. They're shielding themselves from criticism.
Yeah, well, I'm guessing the state is fighting so hard because what the Stanford professors would say would be pretty damaging and shocking. Do we have any idea what they would say?
Well, yeah, one of them has already filed a brief. In fact, that professor who filed this brief along with several other researchers received a letter from the Department of Education saying we're suspending your contract, the contract where as part of this person's just sort of general research, they have access to state education data. They're saying we're suspending your contract because you signed on to this brief that was critical of us in this ongoing litigation. And so it's hard to look at this as anything other than a cover-up for what I think is pretty clearly established now as the most catastrophic domestic policy decision in recent U.S. history.
Directionally, it's only a couple of steps short of Putin having doctors pushed out of windows. I was
just going to say, it's an incredibly Soviet-esque, you were seen in the street with a placard, now you're fired from your job at the factory. It's practically, they don't even bother veiling it.
That's right. Welcome to California. This is the state where last year Gavin Newsom signed a law saying doctors were going to take away your license if you say anything about COVID that the state disagrees with. So we've had cases come out of California that the U.S. Supreme Court has reversed on First Amendment grounds. So all of the things that are disturbing people, I think, across the country about a lack of respect for free speech and constitutional rights, California is sort of at the leading edge, and this is maybe the most egregious example yet.
Congressman Kevin Kiley represents the 3rd District of California. Kevin, how devastating was the learning loss? Do you have a grip on some of those numbers?
Yes. I mean, we've seen from the recent results of the National Assessment of Educational Progress that we've seen declines in reading and math, unlike anything we've seen in a long, long time. In California in particular, we were doing bad before all of the COVID shutdowns. We've had failing public schools in this state for a long time. By the way, I say this as a former high school teacher, as we were, even before the COVID shutdowns, 49th out of the 50 states in terms of learning outcomes for kids in low-income communities.
Yes, but it's very expensive to live here. So, no, wait a second. That doesn't argue.
Exactly. Yes, there's always an excuse, right? Just like California is now declining in population. For the first time in our history. And the governor says, oh, that's just some sort of anomaly related to COVID. But with your point at the top, you have states that charted a much different course, that opened schools, that went as soon as they could, that followed the actual science. And now we're seeing that they're doing a lot better and not cause this generational harm to our kids like was done in California.
I cut you off. What's the one state that's worse than California with the schools?
I think it was Alaska. This was pre-COVID, so California, I'm sure has made some headway in terms of doing even worse since then.
Take that, Alaska.
Yeah, huh? Think you're
How's
so
our
smart.
exhaust taste? Yeah. And I'm going to ask this question in reference to California, but it's true of quite a few blue states around the country. How powerful now are teachers' unions in politics, Kevin?
Well, they're more powerful in California than anywhere, and their power is exerted more forcefully on this governor than perhaps anyone ever. I mean, they have given him more funding than any other California politician. And I remember I was there fighting against Newsom's school shutdown policies from the get-go. And the first time this really came to a head was heading into the fall in 2020. And Newsom had said, we're going to leave it up to districts. But then after a intensive lobbying effort by the statewide teachers union, he did a complete 180, was one of only 5 governors in the country that did a statewide school shutdown order. And that's what sort of locked in the state of schools being closed that didn't reverse itself in large districts like LA Unified, San Francisco Unified, for well over a year after that, and is responsible for the generational learning loss.
And now, as people of good conscience are trying to reckon with that and understand going forward how damaging that sort of thing can be, the state of California is trying to cover it up. Kevin Kiley, Congressman from the 3rd District of California. Kevin, we sure appreciate the time. Keep fighting the good fight.